The body has already been prepared for burial, the linen wrappings are tight, the canopic jars are sealed, the priests have completed their rituals, and then someone stops the funeral. Not because of grief, because of suspicion. In ancient Egypt, the dead could not always rest until the living had answered for them. And the system the Egyptians built to make that happen was not what you would expect from a civilization 4,000 years old. It was systematic, it was documented, it was in ways that will make you uncomfortable, surprisingly familiar. To understand how Egypt investigated crime, you have to understand what the Egyptians believed about the relationship between the body and the truth. For the Egyptians, the physical body was not simply a vessel that the soul left behind. It was a record. It carried the evidence of how a person had lived, how they had suffered, and how they had died. The body, in Egyptian belief, was something that had to be preserved precisely because it still contained information that mattered. This belief had a legal consequence that no other ancient civilization replicated in quite the same way. Egyptologist Jan Assmann, in his extensive work on Egyptian law and society, has described how the examination of bodies was embedded directly into the Egyptian legal process. When a death was suspicious, when a body showed signs of violence, or when the circumstances of a person's disappearance did not match the account given by those around them, the body itself could be presented as evidence before a court, not described, not reported on by a third party, presented. The court could order an examination, and that examination was conducted by a specific class of specialists, the priests of Anubis, the god of embalming, and the dead. These were not simply religious figures. They were, by the nature of their work, the people in Egyptian society who knew more about the human body than anyone else. They handled the dead every day. They understood decomposition, wound patterns, and the difference between a body that had died naturally and one that had not. Archaeologist Joanne Fletcher, whose research into ancient Egyptian mummification practices has reshaped how scholars understand the embalming process, has pointed out that the priests of Anubis would have been capable of identifying blunt force trauma, strangulation marks, and signs of poisoning from the physical evidence left on and inside a body. They were not performing what we would call an autopsy in the modern sense, but they were performing something that served the same function, a systematic physical examination of a body to determine cause of death. And the results of that examination carried legal weight. This is the part that stops most people. In a civilization that operated 4,000 years ago, without microscopes, without toxicology, without any of the instruments we associate with modern forensic investigation, a court could order a physical examination of a body and use the findings to prosecute a killer. The most documented example of this process comes from the reign of Ramesses III in the 12th century BCE. A conspiracy to assassinate the pharaoh known today as the Harem Conspiracy resulted in one of the most detailed legal records from the ancient world. The Turin Judicial Papyrus, analyzed extensively by historian Pierre Grandet, records the trials of over 30 individuals accused of involvement in the plot. The examinations that supported those prosecutions drew on physical evidence, witness testimony, and the systematic interrogation of the bodies and spaces where the crime unfolded. The body was a witness. The priests were its translators. But here is the part that reveals something deeper about Egyptian society. The Egyptians did not investigate crime only because they wanted justice in the modern sense. They investigated crime because they believed that unresolved wrongdoing created a kind of cosmic imbalance, a disruption of ma'at, the Egyptian concept of truth, order, and harmony. A murder left unpunished did not just harm the victim, it fractured the fabric of reality itself. This is why the dead could not always be buried before the living answered for them. The body had to remain available as long as the truth had not been established. Because the body was not just evidence. It was a claim on the living world. It was demanding, in its silence, that the order of things be restored. Egyptologist Jan Assmann, in his work on Egyptian concepts of justice and memory, has written about how ma'at functioned not just as a religious principle, but as a legal one. The obligation to investigate, to examine, to pursue the truth of a death was not simply a matter of social order. It was a cosmic obligation. The state investigated crime because the universe required it. Now, ask yourself what this reveals about the foundations of criminal investigation. We tend to think of forensic examination as a product of the scientific revolution of laboratories and instruments, and rational inquiry stripped of religious meaning. But in ancient Egypt, the systematic examination of the dead to establish the truth of a crime was not separate from the culture's deepest beliefs. It grew directly out of them. The priests who examined the body were serving the law and serving the gods at the same time. The court that ordered the examination was doing the work of Ma'at. The investigation was an act of cosmic maintenance. You already know this impulse. You have felt it every time a case goes cold and something in you refuses to accept that it should. Every time a trial ends without a verdict and it feels like more than a legal failure. Every time you hear the phrase, "the truth will come out," and believe it, even when the evidence says otherwise. That feeling is not modern. It is not rational. It is 4,000 years old. The dead in ancient Egypt could not always rest, and neither, it turns out, can we.